is pleased to bring you our feature presentation.
Memory, prophecy, and fantasy. The past, the future, and the dreaming moment between are all one country, living one immortal day. To know that is wisdom, to use it is the art. The words are Clive Barker's, one-man industry of the fantastique. His books, movies, and illustrations are reaching more people than anyone who has ever attempted to navigate the dark canals of the mind. One might even say that Clive Barker is bent on scaring the hell out of everyone.
Give me that box! Give me the box! We have such sights to show you.
The first most important event was being born. What a extraordinary little radical experience that is. When I first started to publish books, and I knew that I'd signed the contract, and I knew that my books were going to be published, I would wake up every morning and think, my books are going to be published. I'm going to be in print. And it was like a total reassessment of who I was. I am telling my life every time I write a page. My fiction is my confession. Everything that was ever important in my life is written. I'm putting it down. That's what I do. And the more absurd and ridiculous and rococo and baroque the imaginings, the closer it is to me. When I was a kid, the escape from the self was into a world of absolutes. See, I was never really terribly interested in the fiction which I could identify with the exception of Peter Pan. And I identified, and I still do, wholly with Peter Pan. The characters in the Greek myths, for instance, which were really the first myths that I looked at seriously, are not troubled by personality. They're into some more absolute place. And that was always what fascinated me. We don't really know what Oedipus or Orpheus feels about their lives. We don't much care whether they clean up after them when they've strewn clothes around their bedrooms. We don't know how well they brush their teeth. We don't care. What we care about is that the adventure that they're involved in touches us mythologically. And I will do all that I need to convince an audience of the reality of the character who is about to take the adventure, and no more. I'll just say, okay, now, you know this about this person, this is their name, this is their parental situation, this is the house in which they live. At the beginning of Weave World, here is a young man who keeps pigeons. The pigeon escapes. The man follows the pigeon. The adventure begins. I was a cesarean birth. My mother nearly died, and so did I. And from that trauma comes all other traumas. There's a line at the beginning of the Cabal. I was born alive, isn't that punishment enough?
was bored. I'd gone to the limits. There was nothing else I wanted. A box. Not just any box. It opens doors. Doors to the pleasures of heaven or hell.
I'll do anything you want. Anything.
It gave me an experience beyond the limits.
Hellraiser, There Are No Limits, a film by Clive Barker.
I believe that we have to preach to the unconverted. I believe we have to get under the wire. I believe we have to be making movies and writing books which run the risk of being dismissed by critics in order to get to the people who don't think that they like metaphysics, but really do. And if that means that we fret a little bit because Siskel and Ebert don't like us, well, we fret. Big deal. Time is kind to generic work. Time is very kind. If we cast a casual glance at of the year 2000 over the images, some of the prime images that have shaped and obsessed our culture in the 100 years that preceded it, we will find images that at the time were probably not thought to be particularly important. We'll have King Kong with Fay Wray in his hands lowering over the skyscrapers of New York. We'll probably have Karloff at the door looking mean, moody, and magnificent. We'll have Mickey Mouse. Popular culture provides images over and over again which move us and touch us in a very fundamental way. And very often those images are dismissed as being mere populism. There's a real danger if the Fantastique takes too seriously the problem of trying to convince the audience of the rational likelihood of the reality it's trying to present, with the consequence that it kills the celebratory element, kills the carnival element, which should at its best erupt in a totally irrational way. I think the Fantastique is a force of nature. I'm trained as an artist, so the idea of actually doing this all the time, of actually working, making the images, the idea of making characters on the page makes great sense to me. This is not very pretty. Okay, the whole, it's hard, but that seems to me to be just a much more interesting thing to look at than that. This looks hard and unromantic. And I'm actually quite romantic about the process of writing. I'm quite romantic about the process of art, actually. I think I have a very 19th century idea of what art is for. The idea of us as playthings of some vast and ancient race of horribly sentient beings, which I think is a bunch of tosh. I think finally these fictions should lead us back to our humanity.
On the comic book side of things, just to switch gears again, how much active involvement do you have in tapping the vein?
A lot. I always loved comic books. And so now we've got the Hellraiser comic. Have you seen the Hellraiser comic? The hype line on Hellraiser is that I think something like stories the films you could never put on film or something like that. And it's true, the MPAA would simply never allow you to commit this stuff to celluloid. I read comic books voraciously. It's a whole other area of endeavor for me, but one that I'm seriously committed to. Comics, of course, stand for themselves, and what I said to the people who made these things, I said, don't be too bound by the fact that this is an adaptation. Make it itself. And there really is some remarkable stuff. And I was delighted by the way that John Bolton adapted In the Hills of Cities for Tapping the Vein, a very difficult story to transfer to visual form. I thought he achieved some remarkable images. I was at the Fangoria convention over last weekend. 8-year-olds were coming up with Tapping the Vein in one hand and a copy of the Books of Blood in the other.
It's kind of a bit extreme for such a young kid.
It is extraordinary how, but you know, if they're going to read, if it means people are going to read, I love that. Too few people are reading. When I was a kid, I would build those Aurora models, remember, like...
Sure, I used to build those.
Weren't they great? And now I get sent through the post the boxed Pinhead kit. And now it's wonderful. Things come full circle. I am now the maker of something for a new generation of monster-obsessed kids.
Congratulations, you have just purchased Clive Barker's Pinhead Cenobite. This museum-quality reproduction is designed for the serious collector of the bazaar. Please follow the assembly instructions carefully. First, cut away any excess plastic with a hobby knife. Careful not to sever the fingers. Time to assemble your model. Cement upper torso to lower torso. Caution, glue vapors may cause brain damage. You are now ready to finish your pinhead. Paint all vestments black, including cassock, robe, and cummerbund. Flesh areas, creamy cadaver. Open wounds, bloody crimson. Teeth, rotten yellow. Torture tools, paint and hang as desired. Ah yes, the crown of painful pins. Insert these in areas indicated. Your model is now complete. We hope your official Pinhead Cenobite will give you a lifetime of enjoyment.
Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. Brace yourself for terror you have never imagined.
And your suffering will be legendary even in hell.
And horrors you can never escape.
And you wanted to know. Now you know.
Last year, they brought hell to Earth. Now, they'll take you through hell. Hellbound, Hellraiser 2. Time to play.
The problem of being in the flesh is something that comes up over and over again in my fiction, and actually in the movies too. In Hellraiser, one of the most painful scenes is seeing Frank, the creature whose barely spirit, being raised from that spirit because blood has been spilt on the floor, building himself painfully, reconstructing himself painfully. I think we all have actually violent entries. We come in kicking and screaming, or we get the scream slapped into us. And we love life, but I don't think we love it quite as much as we think we do. I think there's large parts of our spirit that yearn to be out of life, and that doesn't mean into death. Out of being, the business of being, the business of feeding, the business of shitting, tiresome business. Flesh is a curious thing. We are preoccupied in our culture with the idea of beauty, with the idea of the perfectibility of beauty. I've just had 5 months in LA. People spending 6 hours of every day working out at gyms, getting tanned, approaching the conditions of gods and goddesses, while their minds are starved and their sense of themselves withers. So something very interesting happens for me, which is that the body becomes some terrible mask. The problem of the body becomes almost a distraction.
Come here, damn you, I want to touch you. Come to daddy.
I find minds hugely sexy, conversation hugely erotic, and I always have. I find the idea of sex and ritual and mystery and the forbidden elements of sex irresistible. The sexual experience is so transcendent and so bestial at the same time. And death is such a very obvious physical horror, and yet offers up so many possibilities of transcendence at the same time. Both are mysterious, and both are of course to do with the body, and both are outside our control.
Now all we need is skin.
The monster never leaves. He just changes addresses. The shopping mall, a climate-controlled womb for blissful consumers seeking perhaps a lost sense of community, clutching coins for a piece of what's left of the 20th century. The 20th century. The problem is, it's all so real. When things get too real, you just know there's going to be some blood spilt. There's a fantastic carnival of culture in progress here. The mall's movie theater, the mall's video library, the mall's bookstore.
Long live the signed flesh. Somebody once said that they thought it took more courage to believe in God than not to believe in God. It was easy to say that life is meaningless, structureless, that we are an abstraction. That's a very cowardly way of looking at ourselves. And I feel the same about the business of art.
We brought our Hellraisin with us to be with Clive.
This is to James. This is to John with an H?
Yep.
Yeah. I need to see the raisin guy.
He's stuck right now.
Oh, but he's great.
He takes the credit for it.
I love it. I love it. The world wants originality. It may not think it wants it. Television doesn't want originality. Television wants to be the second to do everything. But if you do have an original vision, however outre it is, however erotic, however dark, however forbidden the imagery is, I think people have an appetite for it. So I always say, just get on and do it.
Very few things are as bad as you fear they'll be. This the Drooleys knew. So they were experts at making you believe the worst. Huge eyes that seemed in the dark to belong to a much bigger and more ferocious animal. Teeth that were made for gnashing, but bad at gnawing. But it was all in the mind. The Drooleys, when seen in daylight, were pale, thin, apologetic creatures whose trait was a nervous and insipid giggle.
There's a kind of horror fiction, there's a kind of fantastique which is very almost documentary style. I take two examples in two of my favorite horror movies. Les Yeux Sans Visage, the Franchou picture, very scary picture, presented with a kind of documentary flatness. And The Exorcist, done in exactly the same way. Movies I admire hugely. Very scary movies, very disturbing movies. But there's another florid, baroque kind of fantastique. Fellini's Satyricon would be an example, which approach the process of presenting the movie to the audience almost the way that Wagner approached the idea of presenting a story, throwing in as much as they possibly can to swell the audience's feelings. Color and music and grotesquerie and comedy. My first encounter with movie making was being approached by a friend of a friend who wanted to make a movie, a horror movie. And I was the only person he knew who was remotely literate. And I came up with an idea which I thought was rather good. It was very schlocky. It was monsters versus mobsters. The idea being that I'd sort of take a little bit of The Godfather and mix it in with some monsters, and we'd have sort of a set two. The movie manifested itself, I think, as a movie called Transmutations. About halfway through the second draft of it, I was called up by the producers who said, the trouble with your screenplay is it's a horror movie. And I said, yes, that's what you hired me to write. And they said, well, yes, but we've promised our producers a rock musical. And it was one of those moments when you realize that this is the way everybody said the movies would be, and now they are. And if you look at the movie, you'll see exactly what there's this horrible compromise where everything is suddenly turned into sort of a bad MTV video. By that time, in my innocence, I had actually signed 5 of my stories to them, and so I went on in hope that things would get better to script for them an adaptation of one of my favorite stories, a story called Rawhead Rex, which is essentially about a 9-foot phallus on the loose. And they locked me off the set. They wouldn't let me anywhere near it. And again, the movie's horrible. I was sort of starry-eyed about the whole thing. I think people are starry. I think writers get starry-eyed about movies with horrible frequency, painful, tragic frequency. And I thought, oh, this is it. I'll have great fun and so on. And of course, all the classic things that happen to writers when they first encounter the movies happen. Because of both of those experiences, I decided that there was no way forward as screenwriter. I had to make movies myself if I was going to do it. And it was as a direct result of those movies that I made Hellraiser. Where do we start? Fellini, Buñuel, Cocteau, Disney. I mean the classic Disney. I mean Fantasia. I mean Pinocchio. Hitchcock. 6 or 7 key Hitchcock movies, which are irresistible. Cronenberg, Scorsese, Kurosawa. The list is very long. I admire a lot of different kinds of filmmakers. I don't like cowboy movies, but I admire John Ford. I like movies. Minnelli, Meet Me in St. Louis, is one of the 10 greatest American movies. I think it's a wonderful picture. The sensibility that informs the independent movie can, and it's bloody and it's difficult, but can survive in Hollywood. We all know that movies can be gained and lost in their last moments, in their last throes. A movie can be made by its music or broken. ADR can completely destroy the reality of a moment or find freshness in it. Matte paintings can completely destroy credibility. And these are things which will happen literally in the last weeks of a process which may last a year. So I find the whole thing actually deeply frustrating. The writing, which of course is just a blueprint for the film. The designing, which is still preparation, is still foreplay. Everything is foreplay, in fact, until the movie's done. And you can't quite remember when the orgasm was. I love abundance. I love excess. I love the cup to be running over all the time. I love Bosch paintings. I love Moby Dick, my favorite novel, a book too full of wonderment. In The Damnation Game, characters go on spiritual journeys and then are delivered back into their flesh and feel the flesh solidifying around them like cooling fat. It's not a very attractive image. But certainly, I have dreams. I go on dream journeys when waking from them seems to be delivered back into this mundane, dull solidity.
The deluge descended in the driest July in living memory. But then, no revisionist dream of Armageddon is complete without its paradox. Lightning appearing out of a clear sky, flesh turned to salt, the meek inheriting the earth, all unlikely phenomena. That July, however, there were no spectacular transformations. No celestial lights appeared in the clouds, no rains of salamanders or children. If angels came and went that month, if the looked for deluge broke, then it was, like the truest Armageddons, metaphor. There are, it's true, some freakish occurrences to be recounted, but most of them take place in backwaters, in ill-lit corridors, in shunned wastelands among rain-sodden mattresses and the ashes of old bonfires. They are local, almost private. Their shockwaves, at best, made gossip amongst wild dogs. Most of these miracles, however, games, rains, and salvations, were slipped with such cunning behind the facade of ordinary life that only the sharpest sighted, or those in search of the unlikely, caught a glimpse of the apocalypse, showing its splendors to a sun-bleached city.
If we care about the craft we're involved in, we care about it because it can communicate to large numbers of people. Because it has some power to change the world. I'm not interested in art if it can't change the world. My enthusiasm is for the things which are just presented the way a circus presents them and says to the audience, here it is. I don't know whether it's real. I don't care whether it's real. Here it is. I think it's wonderful. What do you think, guys?
What is your pleasure, sir?